Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 6 of my Mandalorian meets Ahsoka figure build for my diorama. And a lot of work on the diorama this week. Now, there's a lot of planning involved in this because obviously I'm doing 2 halves of a diorama that are going to come together. I also have the backdrop in the back, which I'm lighting up, and I'll get that completed on this video. And then of course Ahsoka Tano with her lightsabers and the wiring for her coming down as well. So I got a lot of the main structure completed, and definitely moving along to getting this diorama completed. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I'm going to start cutting up this, the first attempt that I did on the diorama. I'm going to cut it in half in order to start building up the sides and the back of these. So the first thing I did was I laid it down, kind of positioned it where I wanted it, and then I traced underneath to get this line right here. So first thing I'm going to do is cut that in half so it matches up with this, and then I'll sculpt the rest of it and we'll go from there. So let me go ahead and put that aside. And to do this, I'm going to use my my wire foam cutter from Hobby Lobby, because it's easier to have this distance to be able to cut it, since I'm doing a long piece here. So let me see, how's that gonna work? All right, let's try it this way. All right, is that a frame? Yes, it is. This is just a general location of that. I'm going to shape it, and it's all going to work out to be connected together, because obviously I want 2 different halves of this to be, oh, come on, to be on the 2 halves of the base. All right, there we go. All right. Come on, kitty. All right, so let me go ahead and fit that on there, and we'll see how that's going to work. All right, so I laid them down onto the 2 halves, and before I address the inner part, there are a few pieces that have to be cut off, like right here, over in this corner, in order to make it match the outer part. So we'll start with this right here. So just generally cut it down. And the nice thing about this is that this is just the general shape of it. So this isn't going to be the final design or the way it's going to look or fit together, anything like that. There's going to be a lot of other parts to make that work. All right, there we go. So that's even with that. The rest of it's even. This one over here, I'm going to cut quite a bit of that. And it doesn't hurt to put a little bit of jagged kind of design in it as well while I'm at it. There you go. Okay. All right, so still just a little bit there. So we'll just cut that off. Okay. Right, there we go. Now if I put these together, Obviously, I don't want this really pronounced opening here. Plus, I want to bevel down further. I want this coming down a little bit more. So what I want to try to do is, let's start this way. I'll give it a really deep angle, really sharp angle. Some of this is slowing because it's hitting the hot glue that I glued these together with. Okay. There we go. And I always save all the pieces that I end up with because I can use them for other bits and pieces. All right, so that's getting a little closer to what I'm looking for. Let's do the same on the other side here. This one here, I want to kind of see if I can bring it all the way up to here. Take out a lot of this. Okay. Occasionally you get a little bit of foam stuck on there. Don't want to touch it, but I use a paper towel to get that off of there. So, okay. Here we go. All right. Okay. So looking a lot better there. This one a little bit more perhaps. All right, now even kind of flatten that a bit. All right. So definitely looking better. All right. So I'll play with that a little bit more, but I wanted to kind of give you the general idea how useful this tool is to be able to sculpt some of this down and give it the more rounded profile. I have to figure out where my figures are going to be standing. I think I probably want them a little bit lower, so I'll probably lower these down a bit and work on that. So, okay, but coming along pretty good. All right, so as I showed in the previous stills, I started working on two parts of a tree that I'm going to put in the back that are going to disguise the seam between the two halves of the backdrop. So all I did was I twisted some foil into the general shapes that I wanted, and I kind of put them so that they would be together, and you'll see like this, they kind of snug up against each other. And I wanted the two bottoms to curve out. And so because it's two halves of a display, one of them is going to be attached over here, and I'm going to build up down onto the actual foam, like the trunk and some roots and things like that. But the general idea, let me see if I can get these picked up here. Hold on one second. All right, there we go. So other than at the bottom, they're really close together. And like I said, once I attach them onto the two halves of the base, and they get painted, and they have some scenic material like vines and leaves and things like that on them, they're gonna nicely disguise that seam. And I didn't want them to be too tall. I didn't want them to be taller than the top, but I can work out so that you won't see that top part. But you can see it hides the rest of the seam pretty nicely. And like I said, what will happen is these will not both be attached together. They'll be attached, and I'm going to probably cut down into the foam and have them nice and solid so that they're going to be each on their own base. And plus I can go back a little bit so that once I finish this and I glue these onto it, I can actually glue behind these onto the back so that it's nicely supported as well. So, all right, and then I just use some clay working tools to put a little bit of detail into it to look like it's wood. And I can still do some other things. I can also use a pin vise to drill a little bit of holes in it and add some little tiny branches coming out, because these also are going to be really burnt and scraggly, just like these ones over here are in the diorama. So, okay, all right. So I use polymer clay. It's called Premo, Premo, from Sculpey, and you just mold it around the foil, and then you just bake it in the oven for about 20 to 30 minutes, and it hardens it, so it's nice and solid now. And foil is the best way to do it because it's not going to be affected by the oven and melting it or anything, and it's easy to squeeze together and get a nice solid form, and then bend it the way I want it to be. So, okay, all right. So those are completed for the moment. I'll start working on some other trees and that sort of thing. As you can see, I also beveled these down quite a lot and almost smoothed them out because the figure is going to be right about in this area. Ahsoka Tano over here. Back a little bit. Yeah, she's going to be over in this area, and Mando's going to be over in this area. And so I wanted to make sure that I have a fairly level space to do that. And so what I'm going to end up doing is cutting out a little square of 1/8 inch plywood and put it over in each place where they're going to go to give them a nice solid base. And then I'm going to put the tubes down into the aluminum tubes that I showed earlier. So those will be permanent down in there, and then they'll fit right down inside of it. And then I'll have an additional hole for the wiring for Ahsoka Tano to go down through the little disconnect down into the base to plug into the power source as well. So, okay. All right, so I fashioned up a couple of stumps to go into the back where these two trees will then go onto and be attached to. The reason I did them separately is because these have to be baked in the oven. And these were pretty easy to do. I just put the pattern on and then I laid it down. You can even see some smooth parts where it laid down on the foil in the oven and it baked it, but that's the back, so I don't really care. But I didn't have any parts that were going to bend and get softened when they heated up. So the stumps with these twisted roots on them, which I wanted, and I want them to kind of fit over top of this area here. That would have been a lot harder to have the trees coming up out of and bake in the oven at the same time. So I did them separately, and so that way what I can do now is I can use epoxy sculpt, which is also white and a similar type of material, to attach these onto the stumps. So see if I could show you this in frame. So this goes into here, and they're not perfect. I'll have to play with them a little bit. And then this other one goes over into this one. But they're again going to be separate. So these stumps will be glued down permanently onto the base, and then the trees will be put into these stumps with epoxy sculpt and also molded around it. And I'll put some lines in it to look like bark. I just use these little clay rubber silicone tools, which I got from Amazon, to just put some lines in it and some marks and things like that, like I did here. And I use this wire. This is just some really easy to bend, I think it's aluminum wire for jewelry. It cuts easily, and then I could just bend it. And so I used foil for the main part of the stump, and then I used, as I showed in my screenshots, some of this wire to bend for the branches, and just shaped the Premo clay onto it and molded it around it. And then I poked a hole in the stump and the foil, and then stuck these in and just used the tools to attach them. So these have both been baked. So they're set up now, and they're hard. A little bit of a crack right there when I tried to put the stump on, but like I said, it's no big deal. I may even break that off entirely so it fits better, and then I can use the epoxy sculpt to put it on permanently. And then this one is also dry, hardened. All right. So the main thing I wanted to get with these stumps is I want to get them in so that they'll fit where they're supposed to be. The roots will be coming out, contouring onto this this foam here, and they'll look pretty cool. And there'll be a nice solid base to put the trees on. So, okay. All right, so they're looking pretty fantastic. All right, so I want to make these a little sturdier on the bottom since they're just foam. So what I'm using is I have this fairly sturdy board wood. This came from a poster board frame that went inside of it. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick, give or take. It's a nice particle board or something like that. So I didn't have enough. This whole piece fits on the right side, but I didn't have enough to do one whole piece on the left side, so I just used 2 different pieces because of the part that I had. I also cut out a little groove because I need to have the wiring coming down right about here. I'm going to have Ahsoka standing right about here, and her wiring is going to go down through that part. So I put a hole through it, and I cut that groove out, and then I drew a line. So what's going to happen is, this is the back. So this is upside down, and this is upside down. All right, so that's the back. So what's going to happen is then I'm going to have the clear acrylic back here. So I'm going to bring the, since I have an adapter, I'm going to drill a hole through the back right down the bottom there, coming out of the back of the clear acrylic, and that will be where the adapter plugs in. and then the wiring will come through the foam, and the mechanism for the filament bulb will just fit into here. I'll carve this out, and then I'll have the wires just going up the connect. There's a snap-on connect that I can just have ready to go. So I'll have that so it comes up through the top, and it'll go into her foot and light up her lightsabers. So so what I want to do now, I'm going to carve a little bit of this out, but then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to glue these onto the wood using Eileen's felt and foam tacky glue, which is great stuff. I like using this stuff. It takes a little longer to dry, like overnight, so I'm going to have some clamps to clamp it down nice and tight. But that'll give me a nice solid base underneath. I don't really need any kind of openings on the right side because Mando isn't lit up in any way. So I can just glue that on solid. As far as where he's going to be, I'm going to put a wood plate. Probably some more of this that I have left over, just embed a little square plate of wood into it with some 5-minute epoxy so they have a nice solid base as well. So, okay. All right, so there we go. So these dried overnight, and I was able to take the clamps off, and it turned out really well. Went on there really well. So that gives me a nice solid base on the bottom to support both of these. And on the other side, I went ahead and dug out a channel. It's kind of rough, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to see it. It just has to have the wiring going in, and then there's a hole that'll come up through. And like I said, I'll put a little square of this same wood there on the top where I want her to be standing, and the same with Mando over here. And that way I have a nice solid base to stick the aluminum tubing down inside that the other aluminum tubing in their feet can slide into. And then likewise, her wiring can go down through, and I'll have a quick connect for that. So now the inside of this groove here was a little off, so I just went back with my Dremel and a sanding wheel and just sanded it all smooth. So now it fits together perfectly again. So very nice. I really like putting the wood on the foam because that just gives it more of a solid base as opposed to having just foam on the bottom and that kind of thing. Now the nice thing about this, I don't have to have a battery underneath here that I have to get under and get to. It's just going to all come out the back, and then I'm going to have the adapter coming back right through there that you plug it in. And I also left a lip on the back, you can see here, where the acrylic can go onto and give it a nice solid footing. Plus it's going to be glued onto the foam as well with some 5-minute epoxy. So that way that'll be nice and solid, and then I can sand that around to smooth it around the back as well. So okay. All right, so I did a couple of more modifications to get the wiring ready to go. As you saw in the previous stills, I used my Dremel and a pin vise to drill a hole through this acrylic, and then I use some needle files to flatten out the base here so that this fits straight in from the outside and has a bit of a lip on the bottom, so it just goes back in. And then I super glued it in place, and then the wires go through. So then these wires will go through, as I showed in a previous one, to the through the foam and up to Ahsoka, so we can light her lightsabers. And then I built a little box to hold the 9-volt battery, just out of some thick styrene. And I first I super glued it onto the acrylic, but I wanted to make sure it stays on there tightly, so I put some 5-minute epoxy around it, as you can see. And again, I don't care if it's rough looking, it's not going to be seen. This is all going to be in the back, so you're not really going to see it. And then there's the adapter coming through. And I might reinforce that with some 5-minute epoxy as well, just to make sure that it's on there nice and solid. So, all right. And then I snipped off the wires and just taped them up. And then what I'm going to have on this is I just have this little battery clip and a little switch. So I will, once I get it painted, I will attach this on and glue the switch onto the back so I can just press it. and then I'll just put the battery on it, and it'll just drop right down into this slot. And the wires will just be hanging down from here, so it's no big deal. I'll just give a little bit of play so I can move it, take it in and out when I need to change it. So what I want to do is I want to light block the black back of this, and also give it like a light green color so it kind of matches, even though you're really not going to see it. But I don't want it to look black or unfinished. So I don't want to paint the inside of this. I want to keep it nice and clean so I can put the vinyl on. So what I'm going to do is I have another piece of vinyl that I printed that I'm not going to be using, this one. So I'm just going to peel that off, put it on to just mask it, make a masking of it. And then I'll go ahead and get a black coat of paint on the back here. And then probably like a pale green or a light green or something like that, in order to just kind of give it a similar kind of motif as the rest of the build. So, okay. And then the other one I'll do the same thing with, but it'll just be the plain back. It won't have any wiring or battery boxes or anything, because I'm not lighting up the Mandalorian. So, okay. All right, and there are the painted acrylic frames. This is the inside of them. I painted a flat black over it to light block it, and then I painted a green over the back. I forget what color. Let me see what that green is. Krylon Italian olive satin. I wasn't really that worried about matching it up with the front, because you're not really going to see it. I just wanted it to be a little on the same tone. Same with this one here. So, all right. So now what I'm going to do, I went ahead and peeled off the vinyl that was protecting the front, and you can see through to the moon lit up. I did have to paint a little bit of black right on the top edge because I was getting a little bit of a light leak. I may still have to do something with that as well. So also I had to cut off a little bit on the bottom of this where it's going to be hidden behind the foam, and also obviously on this side I'll have to do it where that connector is, and you're not really going to see it because it's going to be behind the base anyway. So, but I wanted a nice acrylic clear plastic, or not painted plastic or vinyl, to glue onto the back of the diorama, so I get a nice adhesion for it. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this one on first, and then I'll go ahead and do the moon, and then we'll finish up the vinyl. The trick I found with this on doing the test ones is that you got to just peel off the backing just a little bit at a time, stick it down, and then slowly start to smooth it over to keep all the air bubbles out of it, and then just keep curling up the backing until you get it all the way around, and then you get a nice smooth adhesion. So, all right. All right, so there we go. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking because I just had to really slowly slide it over, but it went on really nicely, and it's nice and smooth. No air bubbles, no problems. I just have them sitting behind it right now, but that's looking pretty sweet. I got the moon lit up and glowing, so that's pretty cool. And so those two are pretty much done for the moment. I can go ahead and set them aside. I cannot glue them onto this base yet, or the two halves of the base yet, until I get this all finished up with the different materials that I'm going to put on it, and then get it painted, because I don't want to get any paint on the backdrop, obviously. But that's looking pretty sweet. I really like how that turned out, and that vinyl's looking really nice. I like the colors in the trees. I like the nice pale green. That's what I was looking for. Definitely little scraggly trees in the back. You can even see the little teeny ones over there. So, okay. All right, so that's really excellent. Thanks again to Mark Fraley for making that image for me. He did a fantastic job, and that really does capture the image from the episode on the burnout tree planet. So, all right. All right, so I'm working on the little pieces of wood for the platforms for the two figures that I'm going to glue down into the foam. And I have aluminum tubing and also some styrene tubing here for her wiring, so that they'll go down inside of a nice secure fixture there once I get these glued down into it. So I cut some more aluminum tubing that was the right size to go over top of the ones that are glued into their feet, and then I drilled holes through and positioned them correctly. So this is for Mando, and you see those two at the front, that's the back, and they just slide right down into it, and this is the top of it. So this part will go down into the styrofoam, and I cut out a section where it's going to go, and that'll be glued down in with 5-minute epoxy, so it'll be nice and solid. And likewise for Ahsoka, I did the same thing, but in her case I put a tube there and a bigger hole, because this disconnect for her wiring has to go down inside there. I wanted initially, and I messed it up when I first put everything together, I wanted this to be flush so it would just like plug in, but that didn't really work out. So I have an extended wire, and I'm going to stick that down in there, and there's going to be a piece coming up the other side that clicks into it. And I'll just pull it out and then just stick it to the side when I'm ready to do that. But I epoxied these on really well. I'll let those harden. And again, this is the top. And then this one will also be glued down on the side where she is. So let me go ahead and show you how that's going to look on the foam. All right, so they're not sitting flush. They still have to dig out the styrofoam further down for the parts that are sticking out. But I carved out a piece, so it's going to be flush, going to be flat. So this will be her side. And I did the same on his, but then I didn't like the angle, so I cut it again. This was the original way, and then I cut some more, so he's going to go in like this. I had to cut a little edge off so it wouldn't go over the edge of this. And these will be glued onto the foam. They'll be flush down flat, and then I'll build the foam material up around it to disguise the fact that there's a piece of wood there. But in the end, I'll have obviously on this side, this tube going down in right about in this area, going down to where I have that opening so I can run the wiring through and wire up her lightsabers. On his side, there isn't any, so I just have to have holes big enough that these 4 tubes can go down into it and really surround those with 5-minute epoxy as well, so they're going to have a nice solid fit for him to go that way. So, okay. All right. So let me get those connected in, and we're moving along towards getting the main structures all ready to go, so I can then start working on doing some of the scenic material and that sort of thing. All right, so one final positioning, and I've got Mando all taped together. He keeps wanting to fall apart because he's not glued together, obviously, but I just wanted to make sure before I glue these down into the foam that they are in the right position, and it looks like they are. They're both facing off against each other, and they're looking pretty cool. So there's Mando, his cape coming out the front of it. I like how it extends out past the diorama. That's pretty cool. And Ahsoka back there. And obviously when I pull these 2 halves apart, you'll be able to see a better straight on shot of them. So, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take them off. I'm going to glue those 2 wooden platforms down into the base. Let those set up completely so that those will be ready to go. And then I'll be done with positioning everything. I can start working on a few more structures like the trees, and then start looking into putting some foam material down onto the base to give it the right texture. All right. All right, so I have the 2 pieces of wood with the aluminum tubes and the styrene tube glued down into the foam, nice and solid. This is the side for Ahsoka, and you can see the 2 aluminum tubes where the smaller tubes from her feet are going to go down into, and then there's a hole there for the wiring to go down for the plug-in connect, and then underneath you can see it's nice and solid into that channel that I opened up. So all I have to do for the wiring is put the wiring down into there, connect it up to the adapter plug on the back, put in the circuit board for the filaments, and then I'm also going to do a remote control. So I will dig a hole up through the foam at some point somewhere around in here, or maybe even the wood, and just put the put that in there as well, so I can use a remote control to turn it on. And on the right side, I have Mando's glued down as well, and I use 2 on each foot so he would have a little more stability since he's a little heavier with his really thick cape. So you can see that's nicely glued down. This one, obviously, there's nothing on the bottom to see because it's all solid wood, but both of these are nice and solid, so those are not going anywhere. So when the figures are on there, they're going to be nice and solid. And the 2 halves go together nicely still. I have the tree stumps glued on the back, nice and solid. I use some 5-minute epoxy and a little bit of Aleene's foam glue around that as well. You can see that's still hardening right there. I will wait to do the trees coming up off of them until I get everything else done on these, because they're going to be a little obviously spindly and sticking up, so I don't want them just being in my way, but they'll just glue onto those. I will use epoxy sculpt to put those onto there, since that will harden and look pretty much the same. I do want to do at least one more bending tree, like a curving kind of a tree, maybe up in this area right here behind her. We'll see. And then of course some taller trees in the back that are going to be coming up. And then as far as the foam is concerned, I'm going to use a couple of materials that I've used before. I'm going to use this Hardy super lightweight modeling clay, which is actually more like a really light foam paste kind of a thing. It's not really, it is like a clay, but what you can do is mold it down and smooth it around, and I want to see if I can get some texture out of it with like a sponge and that kind of thing. And then over top of that, I can use smooth finish, which I like to use, and I've used quite a lot on other projects to get a nice consistent type of a surface and texture over the whole thing. And then we'll look at painting it and using some different scenic material to come up with the really burnout forest. So, okay, but pretty much all of the structural parts are done at this point, except for the wiring underneath. But I will get to work on those as well. So, all right, starting to look really fantastic and starting to come together. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this week. A lot of good progress. I'm really happy with the diorama and where it stands right now. And I'm ready to go ahead and start putting on some of the lightweight clay, foam clay, and also the smooth finish, and then doing some of the scenery or the scenic materials on it. And also create some more trees as well for it. So, but it's definitely coming along well. And then I'll start working on painting up Mando and getting him on there as well. So thank you to all my new subscribers, and stay tuned. Probably about 2 more videos and I will have this all wrapped up and reveal the finale of it. So very excited about this build, and I think it's turning out fantastically. All right, thanks a lot.